Hey friends, welcome back to the Big Talk podcast. I am your host, Tricia Brouk, founder of the Big Talk Academy, award-winning director, producer, and author. And this is episode 578. This week, I am joined by the incredible speaker and my friend, Kristina DiPalo. Kristina took the stage at my Speaker Salon Showcase last year, and it was such an honor mentoring her on this journey. You can go back and listen to her Big Talk from the showcase in episode 555. Kristina is recognized as a gifted leadership coach, which is true, public speaker, which is she's amazing, strategic communicator, all amazing, and leadership brand professional. Leveraging her skills in narrative and dynamic storytelling, she brings her clients insights and tools to reframe their thinking around what is possible, how to achieve it, and how to articulate their truth in compelling ways. I am super excited for you to hear from her today. Let's do this, everybody. Kristina, I am so excited to welcome you to the Big Talk podcast. How are you today?
Thank you, Tricia. I am very excited to be here. It's quite a thrill.
Oh, my pleasure. It is so exciting that we're having this conversation because we have only met, I don't even know if it was a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago. We met at an event.
Mm-hmm.
At a Tory Burch event,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember you came straight up to me and introduced yourself, and I was so impressed, and you were just like, this is what I want, this is what I see for myself, this is what's happening. And I gave you a book, and then we
Yes.
met and had coffee, and we had the most
Mm-hmm.
incredible conversation about what you had going on and what you had going on in your life. You were moving to New York City, which I was
Mm-hmm.
secretly very excited about, knowing that you were going to be neighbors and that we could have coffee anytime we wanted.
Exactly.
And so I'm so excited because not only are you an incredible person, human being, you're an incredible speaker, and now I have the honor and privilege to call you my friend.
I know. That to me, just, having met you a year ago, and you're right, it was a little over a year ago. It was right before Thanksgiving, I remember. And I remember exactly what you were wearing too. So you made a huge impression beyond just what you said, but your whole how you were entirely pulled together and presenting yourself. And I was like, yeah, this is a woman who really knows what she's doing. But being able to then get to know you through the speaker salon and beyond that point, and for me to feel like I'm starting to get my toe into this very new world for myself, which is it's far more exciting than I thought it would be. I suspected very strongly that it would be exciting, but the level of community and connection that people have and support for each other, it's just boundless. So it's been an incredibly invigorating experience for me to get to know you, and to call you my friend.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Christina. I want to talk about the community a little bit later, but before we do,
Mm-hmm.
let's take you back a little bit. I always ask my guests what your backstory is because
Yeah.
I know who you are today, and I know a lot about how you got here because I know you and we've spent time together. But I'd love for you to share with our listeners, take us back as far as you like,
Mm-hmm.
and how you came to be here today to find your voice.
Yeah, to me it's an interesting story. I think back to even being a child and always being interested in a world of ideas and concepts, and not in an entirely superficial way, but really thinking of what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to experience a life? What are the things that people struggle with? Even at those young ages, I had a great interest in religion when I was very young because I saw it as a way to try and answer some of those early questions for myself. And I always found that I was comfortable in groups of people who were also intensely curious about some of these questions. So with some groups, I would be, rather shy and reserved, but with other groups, especially people who were older than I was at that time, I just found that to be a warm and inviting kind of space. So the idea of expounding on my ideas and sharing my opinion started to just become something that I was facile with. And my late father it was so important to him that his children knew how to hold really cogent conversations with other people, to be able to come to a conclusion about something, be able to support their position, to listen to others. So there was almost like, in-house training that was going on at the same time. But I found that, as I grew and I, finished high school, went to college, and I became very interested in just sort of towing the line in a lot of ways. Um, I thought, well, there are some pretty clear paths for myself, and I'll get a job in corporate America. And ultimately, I did well with that, shifting my focus in my late 20s. And then I found that I was working with people who I was writing for them, their big ideas and their concepts and their narratives, and getting them ready to talk about whatever it is that they needed to talk about from a business viewpoint, and being really interested in getting them prepped and ready, but not so much thinking about myself doing that. Although I would daydream, of course, and envision myself up there and think I probably would really like this space. But I became very comfortable at being in a supporting role. And eventually, what happened was I realized I was being in a supporting role across almost every facet of my life.
Mm.
And I did it in a way, probably an unfair way to the people I was supporting. But the idea that, well, if I'm there, right, if I support you enough, if I pour my heart and my action and my focus into helping others, well, they'll reciprocate, right? I'll get that back. And it didn't necessarily happen that way. And I got to a point around the age of 50 where I started to realize that I would have to become comfortable upsetting people if it meant that I now was ready to get up on that stage. I was ready to move from being highly supportive to being the one out there sharing whatever it is that I wanted to share.
I love that you're two things that I love. One is that you are highlighting how curiosity can assist you in
Mhm.
becoming an influential voice and really you and training you to use your voice.
Right.
And by asking good questions and by being able to communicate in dialogue, that is such a great tool that anyone who's
Mhm.
listening or watching start to pay attention to those conversations that you're having, because those conversations are impacting the person you're speaking with. And if you think for 1 second that you are not a speaker or an influential voice, that's just not true, because you're having the impact on the person you're having a conversation with. And so I
Exactly.
love that you're highlighting this curiosity. The other thing that I love of what you just said is you decided to move into the starring role
Mhm.
instead of the supporting role, and that you were willing to upset people. Not a lot of people, first of all, Kristina, are aware that when they step into the starring role, they're going to potentially upset people or start receiving unsolicited feedback and criticism.
Mhm.
How did you prepare yourself when you made that decision to no longer be supporting, but then to be starring? How did you prepare yourself for what was going to potentially come?
That's a great question, because when I think back on it, I don't know if it was something that I was conscious of doing, but it became so important for me to step into that different perspective, because I knew that what I had been doing had brought me to a certain point and I had a certain level of happiness, but there was a different level of happiness that I wanted. And that became such a potent driver that I just started to accept the fact that these things will come my way, but I cannot lose sight of that bigger need, that bigger desire, that bigger sense of home. That that would be far more critical to me than anything else. I think about. I was just watching this the other day. The final episode of the Amazon Prime series, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, when the character finally delivers the stand up in front of the audience. It was her pinnacle moment at that point. And she talks about ambition. And she says that Ambition may not be an attractive quality in a woman, but you want to know what's really unattractive. Sitting alone in your room, looking out your window and dreaming of the life that you want that's out there, but not having the courage to go out and get it. And I think that that courage and that central understanding that this is exactly what you need is going to allow you to put that criticism, deal with people who aren't happy with you, but not let it pull you back.
Mm. I have goosebumps because that episode really, really was powerful for me, not only because of that moment, but
Mm-hmm.
also because she and her manager
Yes,
have the
yes.
most profound friendship and love for one
Mm-hmm.
another. And talking about community, we might be on stage by ourselves, but we are never alone inside of this community. And
Mm-hmm.
being able to bring you into this community has made our community better. And thank you for that. Also, when you're talking about the courage to know what you desire and to understand what it is you want and how to get it, I'm getting a sense because I know you that it's more than just being on a big stage. It's how you live life.
Yes.
How is the desire and the decision to live life directly related to being an influential voice?
I think it's everything. I don't think that there's any way to decouple those two elements. Um, I don't know for me if it was a question of age. I mentioned it was around the age of 50. I think that that's a huge transition for many people. Um, but it was just that accumulation of all of these thoughts and desires that I had had for so many years leading up to that point, and realizing that I was the one who was ultimately holding myself back, whether I was putting myself in situations where I felt held back, whether I was consciously or unconsciously making certain decisions to hold myself back. And, you kind of I got to a point where I thought, what the blank? Like, I have to do this. I have to go for broke, because I will be far more upset if I never try and do something that's big and audacious. Um, and if I do it and it flames out, well, okay, at least I will have released all of that desire. Then in some form or fashion, it was going to wind up being okay. But not doing anything became not just a passive choice; it became the clear wrong choice for me at that point.
Mm. That's incredible because sometimes we don't know what the right choice is. However, when you understand what the wrong choice is, the right choice
Yes,
becomes very clear.
exactly.
I love that. For everybody who's listening, who listens to the podcast, I'm just going to bring to your attention that Kristina's Speaker Salon Showcase talk is episode 555, and it's called Redefining Your Purpose. And like I said, I had the privilege of working with you, Kristina, at the Speaker Salon in New York every week on stage. And I remember very, very clearly you showed up on day one with your talk fully written. And I think you might have almost been memorized. And it's there's no right or wrong here. It's just the process is different for
Yeah.
everyone. And I remember being completely blown away with your ease, your effortless delivery. Were you surprised that it was so effortless for you?
I don't know if I felt that it was effortless at the time, and thank you for that. That's incredibly kind. So thank you.
It's true.
um, I was so connected to what I was talking about, and I am someone who is always looking for ways to improve. So I thought, okay, I was kind of walking in at my baseline, and then working with you, I realized that, oh, there's so many more levels for me to go through. And I'm still at that point. Like, the way that I present now, if a year from now I'm doing it the same way, then I may not have necessarily learned everything that I need to learn about, what my capacity is and how I can further connect with an audience. Um, but the idea of being up in front of people, I'm one of those odd ducks. I'm fine with it. It's funny, you see these surveys, right? The most terrifying thing that a person can say, even beyond losing a job or death, or these horrible events, is standing up in front of other people talking. And I always kind of thought, gee, maybe I'm a little off because I don't seem to have that fear.
You do not. You do not. And what's great about that is that fear, because it doesn't exist, you can move into the work much quicker.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what you did, and that's what you do. For those of you who have not yet listened to the podcast 555, I'm just going to kind of talk through your experience of sharing
Mm.
your personal story and the line that will forever be in my memory. I'm not done yet. Let's talk a little bit about your process when it came to writing that talk, because it's very personal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was trying to find a way to get into this idea of getting to a certain point in life and starting to feel that you're obsolete. Now I'm moving and expanding that more into how do you deal with the transition? Because I think when I look back on my life, there were multiple transitions that I went through. The one I'm going through now is sort of age and career related, but every human goes through big transitions. But I had been chewing on the idea of what it means to start to feel that you're obsolete in life, and had started to write a little bit of a very initial sort of memoir about that, very much from the perspective of being a woman at this point in life. um, and I just kept like journaling and letting it go and letting it go. So when I signed up for the speaker salon, um, I was trying to find a hook to bring myself into this broad topic. And my process, whether I'm on a professional side, or doing something personally, anything that I've written down, I kind of like lay out on the floor, and I group it together by whatever natural theme has come up, and then I just kind of sit with it. And sometimes I will like walk around the pages sitting on the ground, and then it just sort of comes to me. And for me, that seminal story, which in many ways that is the central tragedy of my life's history, which is losing my father to lung cancer so suddenly, and at the age of 24.
Mm.
And it clicked for me because watching the experience of him going through feeling obsolete, and ultimately where that led him, his early death, that then suddenly was like, that's the way in. That's the way in to talk about this concept in a way that perhaps people will be able to connect with.
When you realized that sharing your personal story was the way in, did you have any hesitation there?
Mm-mm, no. No, because it's the truth. It's the truth of what I experienced.
Yeah.
And I've had you know personal tragedies, romantic tragedies, professional tragedies. None of us get out of here without any cracks, right? And scrapes and bruises. But that experience of my father's diagnosis, dying 10 weeks later, the impact on the family, the impact on me, that's the core. So if I'm able to provide something for people by sharing that, then why would I not want to share that?
Such a good point. And for everyone who's listening and watching, when you determine what it is that you want to share from your personal life, Christina's making a perfect point that it needs to be the way in to the bigger picture,
Mhm.
to the bigger idea. And that's what you do with redefining your purpose in the speaker salon. And it's on YouTube as well as
Mhm.
episode 555. So be sure to check that out. Let's talk a little bit about your process of being performance ready.
Mhm.
What was that like for you?
I actually started to hearken back to my days of being a student, and I would memorize everything. I would memorize, conjugation tables for French verbs. I would, memorize all of my history notes or my poli sci, or passages in books, or math and sciencey things. Which, for me, that Yeah. Anyway, the other subjects were much more aligned with me, but that would be my process. And I would, as I talked about, kind of like walking around the pages that I lay out when I try and have an idea, come to me. I would do the same thing. I would circle when I was, living at home with my parents. I would circle from the kitchen through the living room, through the dining room. I would go up the stairs. I would come down the stairs, and it just became that practice. So when I thought about memorizing the speech, I already knew that, I had a method that I had used. I brushed it off and I tried it again, and it seemed to work. But there were a number of things, though, that you had taught us as well that were incredibly helpful.
Thank you. I love hearing the process. And for everyone who's listening, every process is different, but you cannot get away from memorization. You just have to do it.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
When you took the stage, and I have this memory in my mind so clearly, when you took the stage and you delivered the talk and you were in such command of the material, you were in such command of your choreography and your blocking, you were very clear that you wanted to wear something spectacular, which you did. Like every detail that I talk about, you took and you ran with, which I was super excited about. And I remember you walking off stage, and I'm at the back of the house during the
Yes,
speaker
yes.
salon, and just you were beaming. Let's share a little bit with the audience about that feeling of when you know you nailed it, you crushed it, and how empowering that is, and why it's so important to celebrate that moment.
Oh, absolutely. I remember feeling not pressure but responsibility because you had put me in the lineup as first. So I felt I've got to do everything I can to kick this off well, right? To be able to pass the baton to everybody else. So I kind of taken on that sense of accountability for myself. So it wasn't just feeling incredible satisfaction when I walked off the stage and I was like, I did it. This is the space that I have to be in, that I am supposed to be in. It just reinforced that. But I
Mm.
was also thinking, I helped set it up well for everybody else. I almost like, you saw me when I walked off and I was beaming, and then, I went back up to the room. And as I was walking up those stairs, I started to tear up. I started to think about my family. I started to think about my dad because it was also it was an homage to him. So it was my personal pride at knowing I had done it, but it also was very emotional from that other perspective too.
Thank you for sharing that, Kristina. And to reflect that this work is incredibly transformational, it's incredibly vulnerable, and it's legacy work.
Yeah.
It's really legacy work, and that kind of understanding, you take the responsibility to the stage always. But I just love that our listeners are hearing from you that it is legacy work and it
Hmm.
is transformational, and you become who you are meant to be during this process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It surprises me in some ways why more people don't do that because, you know, there are millions and millions of stories that are out there, and they may be similar. There's lots of people who have lost a parent at an early age, but the way in which it happened to you individually and what you lived through with it and what you took away from it, that's very individual. And there are people out there who, are dying to hear that particular perspective on that event in your life. So I encourage anyone who's thinking about getting up on a stage, just run with it. You have to run with it.
Absolutely. And if you're being called or you have that desire, then it's meant for you.
Hmm.
And the other thing to keep in mind is there's one person out there on this planet of 7.8 billion people who need to hear it from you. And
Exactly.
so I give you all permission right now to finish listening to this podcast and then go write your story so that you can start sharing it for sure.
Yeah.
Something you touched on, which I love so much, is passing the baton.
Mm.
I often take our speakers through a meditation where I have them visualize before they go on stage. I have them visualize being on stage. I have them visualize what happens when the audience gives them their standing ovation. And then I talk about leaving the energy on the stage in support of the next speaker.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you shared that you took the role of passing the baton very seriously is so meaningful to me, and I'm not surprised. And it's also part of this community. You know, you were in community at the speaker salon. Everybody shows up every week to support one another. What was that experience like for you?
Oh, that was fantastic. I mean, I've worked in a number of, corporate and professional environments where people are supportive of each other, but people are also in competition with each other. And it would be easy, thinking about getting up on a stage and you're the one who wants the most applause, right? Versus anybody else. That type of, energetic perspective on it. But that was not the experience at all. And it helped me understand that that should never be the experience. Um, if I am delivering something that's valuable to 5 people in an audience of 500, then I've already hit a home run. And the next person, if they can deliver it then to another 5 or another 10 or another 20, um, it, nobody wins if we're competing against each other.
Hmm.
It's we all wind up winning if what we're doing is impacting other people and changing minds and opening perspectives for other people. So, but it's different because I had worked in an environment that wasn't quite as supportive in that way.
Well, thank you for being in this community. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Are you ready for some fast talk?
I am. I am. I have my notes. I'm a good little perfectionist here. So yeah, let's go.
All right, let's do this, Kristina. What is your favorite book?
My favorite book, it's a toss up between The Last Temptation of Christ by Nikos Kazantzakis. Beautiful book, absolutely beautiful. And Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Two epic books. Amazing. Who is your favorite speaker and why?
Would have to say, I don't know if he qualifies as a speaker, the late Spalding Gray,
I love
who
Spalding's work.
wasn't was an artist, a writer, a performance artist, an actor. I remember seeing on Home Box Office, when it was called that back in the day, the film, the Jonathan Demme film, Swimming to Cambodia,
Yeah.
where he's just sitting at his desk and he is just going through this entire fantastical tale of him filming a movie, and then also some history of what was happening in Cambodia and U.S. history. And it struck me because the way he used himself, his voice, his storytelling, his craft, to kind of keep you absolutely engaged and riveted. I just that probably was one of those early indicators of maybe I want to do something like that. So.
I love that. He was a legendary performance artist in New York City, among other things as well. All right, we already talked about how you memorize, so thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that.
Oh, I
What?
do want to mention the Italian.
Oh, yes, go for it.
The Italian, for everyone who's listening, that was an absolute revelation because, I'd be doing the dishes and I would be just going through my speech super, super, super fast, or making the bed. And I think that's a fantastic hack.
Awesome. And if you have not listened to this podcast and you're wondering what Christine is talking about, it's a rehearsal technique that we use in the theater called an Italian run through. And you just do it as fast as possible with no emotion, and you keep going, and then it really trains you. And it's based on um, early century Italian opera where they had to strike shows really quickly to put another show up into the theater. So that's the history of what that means. It doesn't mean you do it with an Italian accent, although you
No,
can if you
I
want to.
mean, if it makes you happy.
Yeah, whatever makes you happy for sure. What do you do the day before you speak, whether it's on a stage or a podcast?
I try and get good sleep. I like to take walks, so I like to just, be out. I'll walk through the city. I'll go into the park. I'll still be kind of rehearsing, but I'll peak a few days before with the number of, run throughs that I will do of my talk. And then as the day gets closer, I cut down on them. So in one day, if I do it 6 times, for example, as I get closer to the actual performance date, I will then maybe cut it down to 3. And then maybe the day before, do it once or twice because I don't want to make myself overly anxious.
Amazing. Such good information. And remember, everybody, your process is your process. And I hope that
Mhm.
you can take support from each of these speakers and whatever resonates with you and try all of it and see what resonates with you.
Yeah, exactly.
What podcast are you currently obsessed with?
I have to say that I am a big fan of Kara Swisher. So I listened to her when she was, the New York Times, and then now she's with the New Yorker. She has her podcast on. There's something that I really like about how she interviews people,
Mm.
and she does not hold back on her opinion on anything. And even if she's interviewing someone and they answer a certain way, she'll throw out like a little aside if she doesn't agree with them. And I just find that delightful. So that's kind of where I am right now.
Amazing. And we'll put all of this in the show notes, everybody, so you can listen to these podcasts as well. Thank you so much, Kristina, for
You are
being a
welcome. Thank you.
featured guest today on the Big Talk podcast. Where can our listeners get in touch with you?
So you can find me obviously through LinkedIn at Kristina DiPalo. Anyone who wants to reach out to me, connect with me, please go ahead and do that. I have a website, KristinaDiPalo.com, which, just as a shout out, I am in the process of revamping. So I'm planning to do a big new launch on that, a refresh in the beginning of the year. But you can reach me there. And also, you can reach me on Instagram also. But I would say LinkedIn really is probably your best bet.
Amazing. And if you are watching this episode on YouTube, you get to see that incredible When Harry Met Sally Christmas tree behind Kristina.
Ta-da!
Living in New York, it makes my heart sing because that movie is something Joe and I
Oh,
watch every Christmas.
it's
And
fantastic.
living in New York City during Christmas time is like
Magic.
magic. It is magic. It is magic. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, for dropping in with us on the Big Talk today. I so appreciate your time. Being here with us means a lot. We know where you could spend your time anywhere, and being with us is really, really important, and we appreciate it. If you loved this episode, share it with your friends. Hit us up on Instagram. Let us know how we can support you. And if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe and notification bell so that you can get access to the latest episodes. Remember, everybody, your voice matters. Big love. Mwah.